It doesn't really matter if you haven't fished a Neko Rig ever before and it's going to be your first time, or if you've been using it for years since it came out. You're going to want to stick around for this video. I'm about to put you up on game. All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. I've gotten a lot of questions about how to fish a Neko Rig lately, or my input about the technique. If you don't know what the Neko Rig is, it's basically a finesse bass fishing technique that came over from Japan, just like the majority of the more popular ones out there right now. And it was one of the main techniques used to win the Bassmaster Classic this year. And of all things, a Neko, that's what shocked me. Of all things, a Neko Rig and a freaking pink chatterbait. But the Neko Rig it's a finesse bass fishing technique that came over from Japan years ago. And a lot of people liken it to a modified wacky rig, which it kind of is. They just don't fish the same way, at least not quite the same way, and we'll get to that in a second. There will be some recorded on the water footage in this video later on towards the end. What I'm going to do right now is explain why you should be fishing this technique in the first place, and also how to actually effectively use it towards the end of this video on the water. What I noticed is there's a bunch of people on YouTube and a bunch of other spaces where they'll show you how to rig the technique, but not how to actually connect the dots and use the freaking thing. So I'm going to do that myself. First of all, let's talk about the baits that you use for a Neko Rig. You can use most any straight tail finesse worm or any Senko cigar type worm. Your old standard Gary Yamamoto Senkos are good. Missile baits, quiver worms are also very good. That's a popular one. And there are also some specialized Neko baits like those made by Daiwa, the Daiwa Yamamoto crossover. These are the Neko Fats. Also the Neko Crawler is another good one. I about ran out of those, only kept this one in the package to show you. If you can find any of the Yamamoto cut tail worms on clearance, those are good. So basically any long straight tail worm is the primary bait that most people use for the Neko Rig. You can also use crawfish type baits. I'll get to that in a second also. And also creature baits. The technique has expanded over the last few years with certain tools and modifications where you can Neko Rig just about anything. Yes, also we know that the real term is Neko Rig, if you pronounce it the way the Japanese intended. But we're Americans and we do what we want to do over here. So, next thing we need to talk about is the particular hooks. You can use your standard wacky hooks with the white gaps on them. I actually recommend you don't do that. What seems to work the best are straight shank hooks. Straight shank Neko hook or wacky hook does a much better job at hooking up and keeping fish pinned. You get a way better hook up to land ratio when you use a straight shank hook. Personally, obviously, I prefer the Owner Sniper Finesse variety. And I also like the ones that come with the little titanium weed guards, or the monofilament weed guards that stick out of them. Those are very good. As far as rods, you can use pretty much any medium power, or if you use a small enough Neko Rig, even a medium light power spinning rod. Anywhere between 12 and 15, well, 10 to 15 pound braided line. You normally want to go with a high vis one because you're watching your line for bites a little bit more often than you are trying to feel for them. So your yellows, your chartreuses. I use Sunline Overwatch on mine, and it's kind of a metered type of braided line where every foot or every couple of feet the line changes colors. It makes it easy for you to watch your line. You want to take that braided line, tie it to a fluorocarbon leader, anywhere between as low as 6 pound up to 12 and as heavy as 14-pound test line if you're fishing a big Neko rig, which is something else that we'll get to in a second. So now I'm going to show you the basic way that most people rig the Neko rig. I'm pretty sure you've seen this 1,000 times. If you all you got to do is YouTube search Neko rig, and you're going to see everybody show you how to rig it, but very few people are going to actually teach you how to fish the thing. Basically, all you're going to do is you're going to take your bait. If you have a wacky tool that comes with these O-rings, this works very good. It's very useful. All you do is stick it, just put your worm in the end of the tube, and then you just roll off one of these little rings. You only need one. Set that on there. Get yourself a hook, and you want to make sure that you're going from the bottom up, in the bottom and out like that. Now, another thing that I do, actually that's a little bit too far. Let's do it like this. You want to get a little bit of that plastic on the hook. You don't want to do it just by the ring, because every time you're casting it, all the pressure and force of your casting is going directly on the ring, and it's easy to pop it. You want just a little bit of that plastic embedded where the hook is. Then after that, you'll take a weight. It doesn't have to be tungsten, but tungsten is a little bit better to use because, first of all, it's smaller, and also it is easier to fill the bottom with. Tungsten being more dense than lead or tin or whatever your other sinkers might be made of, is much smaller and a little bit easier to use. So then you take your nail weight, stick it right in the head, and that's it. That's a Neko rig. All this does is it sinks down to the bottom, just like that, and as you're twitching it, the bait is right side up on the bottom, and it's just coming along the bottom, just twitching and quivering across the bottom. Very soft, very subtle technique. Now, why you would do this? First of all, there are some places where a finesse technique just doesn't get down to the fish, the level of the fish, fast enough. For example, the weightless wacky rig, it just takes forever and a day to make it down to the bottom. If you're fishing in deep water, it's just not that effective. Also, casting distance. There are a lot of finesse presentations that just don't get you the distance that you need. Another scenario where you opt for a Neko rig over something else is when you want to be able to move it faster. That's one of the main things that I attribute to my Neko rig usage. That really makes me use this technique more than I pick up other techniques, is because of its ability to cover water but still be a finesse presentation. This is a lot less intrusive and a lot less aggressive than a freaking crankbait or a full-blown buzz bait or something like that. At times when fish are very finicky, you're fishing for very pressured fish, or in a scenario where these bass have gotten used to seeing every lure under the sun, you would be wise to pick up something like a Neko rig. You can cover a large expanse of water, like say a big shallow flat, or just a pocket in the back of a cove off the main lake or something like that. You can cover the whole thing and get a lot more bites on something this subtle and something this quiet than you could with something that's loud and aggressive and crazy, especially on those bluebird sky days where it's flat, calm water and things get really tough. After a storm passes through, you get that those post-front conditions. This really comes in handy. Now, taking it to the next level, here's a few things you need to know about the Neko rig that you may not have seen. All right, taking things to the next level. First of all, if you are going to use your standard wacky tool, I recommend that you do not use the black bands. The black ones and the red ones, the black ones and the red ones are a little bit stiffer and they break more easily. So I would really recommend you don't use those. Get these clear ones. They're a little bit more flexible. They stretch more and they're a little bit of better use to you. They last longer. Outside of that, I don't use those anymore at all, actually. From Arsenal Tackle, they sell these tubes. These Neko wacky tubes. And you can get this tool that goes with them. You can order this as a kit on Tackle Warehouse, or you can get them separately. The kit also comes with tungsten weights, tungsten nail weights that you can stick into the heads. Looks like these. All right. So what you do when you're putting that together is, let me grab one of these quiver worms as an example. So you grab a bait and you grab your little wacky tube. And what you do is you take that tube like so, stick it on the end of your tool, and when you press these together, it actually opens it up. All right, so I'm going to take that, open it up, stick it over the worm. You want to go about 1/3 of the way up the worm. The more of that worm you leave sticking out the back end, the more action you're going to get as you're fishing the bait along the bottom. You don't want to put your hook placement way up here. You want it to be down more towards that first third of the worm. So now that I've got that on there, you take a weight and stick it in the head of your worm. Which, by the way, that's one of the more important parts of fishing a Neko rig too, is what type and style of weight that you're using in the worm. I know it doesn't sound like that much, but it's actually kind of important. You see, when you're fishing a Neko rig and you hook a bass, they have a tendency to come and throw it off the lug, throw your sinker out of the worm. But with certain styles of worm and certain styles of weights, you can get around that and save a lot more money doing that. Speaking of saving money, that's what these tubes are for. These Neko Wacky tubes, they secure the bait a lot better, and you have a lot more area that covers up your hook point as you're fishing the Neko rig and casting it. So during use, when you hook a fish, this actually will slide, the worm will slide up your line up here, and then you just got the hook into the fish's mouth, and you're just fighting him straight on that hook by itself. You're not losing as many baits, you're not losing as many sinkers. It just works a whole lot better that way where you're using these tools. As far as the sinkers go, the sinkers that screw into the worm, you can take just a standard screw from the hardware store also, just screw it into the worm. If you wanted to, just cut it off at the tip and just screw it in. Get some different sizes for varying weights. That would work for you. The screw types bite into the plastic and they don't get thrown out as much. Another one that I like are these Wacky Neko sinkers by Lunker City, because they have that ball on the end. The majority of the weight is down towards the head part. These pagoda style weights are the kind of general purpose style weights that I would use for a Neko rig. They do a good job at just fishing one in general. If you don't know where to start, this one's pretty solid. Also, by Z-Man, they have the Neko Shrooms Wacky Rig weight, and this works very well. It has that kind of bait keeper barb on them, and that buries itself and bites into the plastic very good too, to where you don't throw and spit as many worms off and as many weights. You can save a lot more money doing that. Now, onto specific worms and baits. I would separate my Neko rig baits into two categories: baits that float and baits that are heavily salted and sink. So all of your Daiwa, Yamamoto baits, any of your standard Senkos, any of your heavily salted Zoom trick worms, those baits I have a tendency to fish faster. The reason for that is because at rest, they literally just fall over. This bait will come through the water looking very good, very natural, and then at the moment that you stop moving, it just lays flat and doesn't look like anything. It's not a great presentation when it's just laying dead on the bottom all the time. Why I like baits that float, for example, like this Demiki Air Crawl, is number one, these baits are very, very buoyant. So it slows the fall rate as they're coming down towards the bottom. If your fish are coming up and looking at a bait and not eating it, this can get you a lot more bites as it's just slowly falling down towards the bottom, instead of just rocketing down to the bottom straight past them. Now, either one can be good or bad on a particular day. You might want to experiment with that, but buoyancy is a big deal with the Neko rig, I've discovered. Also, these floating baits will stand straight up on the bottom. and they can get a fish's attention, and they can be used in other techniques or be more versatile than baits that just sink and fall straight down to the bottom very quickly. You can dead stick a bait that floats. You can shake it more or less in place and get a fish to bite that really doesn't want to. Those do a very good job at delivering bites. Also, these baits that float and have air pockets in them, they hold scent well. So you can get yourself one of those liquid scents and get some down into the claws and this Demiki air craw. Or if you have a Grandy Bass airtail bait, such as this one, this is the airtail wiggler. It has a lot of ridges on it, and it has a hollow point in the tail. This is completely hollow at the very end of the tail, and it stands straight up. And these ridges will hold scent well, as well as the little pocket in there that's just full of air. And you can get a lot more bites on something like that. So when I have to fish a Neko rig and I realize that I have to slow down, I'll go with a floating bait. Whereas if I'm just covering water, just looking for any active fish that I can find, and I'm just covering water, I'm going to go with something that sinks because I can fish it faster and more efficiently cover a wider area. Now, a few more advanced tips for you. If you have your standard pagoda weight, your standard tungsten pagoda weight like that, you can stick it in the worm a different way and not have to have it fling out of the head of the worm. Also, you take it and go up about an inch or so and put it in the top, put it into the worm from the top down instead of from the bottom up. When you do it like this, you insert it in the worm like that, you're still going to have all the weight in the front end of the worm, so it still sinks down the same way that it would rigged straight into the bottom of the head, but it doesn't come flying out of the plastic because it's been inserted up here, and it's not going to be just hanging into the bottom, because as you're fishing it across the bottom and it's making contact with things and you're catching fish, they seem to get loosened up in the head, and then you'll be fishing it, and all of a sudden your worm will just start sinking slowly or cast badly, and you really didn't find out you don't have a weight in it anymore. So inserting it from up here is a good move when you're trying to be cost effective on these tungsten weights, because they're not cheap, man. Okay, so that's the long and short, basically the Cliff Notes version of how to fish a Neko rig with a couple of more advanced techniques and little specifics added in there. As far as baits go, my top 3 recommended would be, well, the Missile Baits Quiver Worm. I like the 6.5 myself because I'm normally fishing for largemouth. If you're a smallmouth or spotted bass guy, you can get the 4.5. The Gary Yamamoto Sensei Worm is also a very good one. This one's a salted bait, so it falls quickly. It just lays flat on its side, so you have to keep this one moving, but that profile and overall size they really seem to like. My third would be the Demiki Air Craw. They just don't get to see this very often, if at all, and it seems to do a really good job at triggering bites. Plus, like I said, it can dead stick flat on the bottom and catch fish without even moving. As it's sitting on the bottom like that, even with just the current in the water or the wind blowing, it'll be waving around down there, and then when you twitch it again, it looks like a little crawfish in a defensive position. Very, very, very good bait, and this a technique with this lure I don't think people are really using out there like that, and if they are, nobody's talking about it. All right, so we're going to move over to the on the water portion of this video so that you can see how to actually fish this technique. Like I was saying, there's a lot of people talking about the Neko rig, but very few people showing how to effectively transfer all of this stuff to the water. So I'll see you guys out there. All right then, so how to fish a Neko rig, since nobody else is actually telling you how to fish the dang thing. So what I've got is a Gary Yamamoto Sensei worm rigged up. This is a size, what, number 2 owner sniper finesse worm hook. So the primary way that I fish a Neko rig is to throw it out, let it get all the way down towards the bottom. After I've made it all the way down to the bottom and I see the line go slack, I'll reel up the slack and I just shake it. This is all you do. You just reel it and shake it across the bottom. You know, what makes this a good technique for doing this is because the hook is not on the bottom, directly on the bottom, it does a good job at coming through muck and, you know, any stuff that's laying down around on the bottom. That was a fish right there. So yeah, that's the primary way to fish it. Throw it out, let it get down to the bottom. After you've made it down, I point my rod tip up at a 45-degree angle, and I shake the rod tip. And I'm just giving it a slow reel the entire time. This is my speed. I'm not going any faster than that. So you kind of play into the power finesse category here because you're dragging it and reeling it along. It's moving, but it's still a very small, natural, subtle presentation. Okay? Second way to fish a Neko Rig. Neko Rig, Neko Rig, whatever. Take it, throw it out. I let it get down to the bottom again. Now, I normally do this technique with soft plastic craws because it's a natural kind of an action that crawfish have when they're fleeing, running away from bass or something that's trying to eat them. I'll blend my slack, I'll pop it, let it get down, and I'll just reel it steady, slowly across the bottom. Pop it again. Now, if you have a floating plastic, like one of those Z-Man floating plastic worms, or if you have the air craw, like I showed earlier, you can actually snap it up off the bottom, let it come back down, and just let it rest. Just don't let it move at all. And a lot of times they'll follow it after you snap it up, and if they don't eat it on the drop, they'll hit it as soon as it makes it back down to the bottom. What I like about that technique is that if I have floating plastic and I leave it in place, I can get a bass to come up and sit right on top of it and they'll just grab it. I can slow down my retrieve a whole lot more. Instead of just doing that reel the entire time, I can snap it up, let it sit, and I can fish it for a longer period of time. Also, those floating plastics, like those air craws and Z-Man plastics, they have a slower fall rate. And so that slower descent can get you bites that you may not have otherwise gotten. Drop speed is a big deal, especially when you're fishing in deeper water around suspended fish or fish that are just really finicky and have seen a bunch of everything already before. Sometimes a slower drop works, sometimes a faster drop works. You're going to have to kind of experiment and see what it is that they want that day. So, the third retrieve that I do with a Neko Rig is also a technique that you fish for suspended fish. Let's say you're on a spotted bass lake and they're sitting down in the brush pile or something like that. You're on a boat, they're in, say, 25, 30 feet of water. If you have live sonar, what you'll notice is that a lot of times when your bait is sinking down towards the brush, you'll see these fish come out of the brush and they'll come up and look at it. So what you do is you'll take your Neko Rig and you put a lighter weight in the head. Something like a 32nd ounce or something, you know, one of those small little tungsten weights in the tip of the head where it's not too heavy. You want to increase the drop speed over it being a weightless bait, but you don't want it to fall too quickly because you're still fishing some pretty deep water. And what you'll do is you'll let it fall down directly to the level of the fish or just above the level of the fish, and you'll snap it like a wacky rig. Just pop it up over the head. Just keep it over their heads. Don't let it get all the way down towards the bottom. At that point, you just want to work it over them, and they'll come up from where they're at out of the brush and they'll eat it. What that looks like normally is how you normally fish a wacky rig. You're throwing it out, letting it sink down to the level of the fish, and you're just kind of working it over the level of the fish. That works. One more way to fish a Neko Rig. If it's really, really bad and it's really, really tough, they won't eat anything that you've shown them, you go to a really small one. Go to a small, skinny worm like the Daiwa Yamamoto Neko Straight or Neko Crawler, that worm. And you put it on you put a little bitty hook in it, and you put a little bitty weight in the head. This works great for covering water across flats where you know that they're there but they won't eat. You throw it out, let it get down, and you just ever so slowly just turn the handle. No extra movement. Just slowly reeling it, just like this. And that's it. you'll be surprised at the amount of fish that you'll catch just slowly, barely dragging that across the bottom. Okay, so those are a couple of techniques you can use to fish a Neko rig with. It's also good if you're fishing it as a bed bait, and it's also really good as a sight fishing lure. If you're walking the bank and you see some up on the bank, and especially right now this time of year, May, June, where they're hanging out around the bluegill beds and stuff like that, they're spawning brim all over the place, and you'll be minding your business and you see them rush up to the bank and attack bluegills. Or maybe you just see them cruising. There's a lot of those fish that are post-spawn right now. They're just hungry and looking to feed back up again so they can get their energy back. After they've got done with their recovery period, they're just swimming around just looking for something to eat. So you can be walking the bank, have a good pair of polarized sunglasses, walk by, see one, pitch it right out in front of him. Do not drop it right on top of his head, but drop it maybe 4 or 5 feet in front of him. You can work that Neko rig in his face, more or less in place, and they'll just scoop it right up. So, next thing is setting the hook. When you're setting the hook with the Neko rig, it's important to not actually set. It's very much like how it is with a drop shot rig. Anytime you have one of those really small, really thin finesse hooks, all you really need to do is reel. Just reel and lift. You don't need to give them that Bassmaster Classic ledge fishing with a Carolina rig, that big sweep. Or you don't need to give them that big overhead snap that you do with a jig or a frog or something like that. You just need to give it a quick reel down and lift. That's it. That hook is so small, so thin, and so sharp, majority of the time, you'll just stick them right in the roof of the mouth. All you have to do is keep pressure on them. Don't let them jump a whole bunch, and you're going to get them in. Alright, so now that we've gone over how to fish Neko rig, let's see if I can catch one for you. One more thing I forgot to tell you is what a bite feels like when you're fishing this technique. Now, I know that sounds crazy to some people that have been fishing their whole lives, or anybody that's been fishing for more than a few years, bass fishing. But it's kind of a unique case with the Neko rig, you see, because a lot of times when you're fishing it across the bottom, especially if it's in deeper water, you won't know that you got bit. You'll just suddenly feel pressure. A lot of times you'll just be working the bait across the bottom and it just kind of feels like it got hung up a little bit, maybe like it's a wad of grass or something, and then all of a sudden the wad of grass starts swimming, and at that point you reel into them. But being a line watcher, watching your line, and being attentive, and keeping your finger, here's one of the tricks, keeping your finger on the blank of the rod will telegraph bites to you a little bit better. Small fish, you feel a tap, a quick tap tap. Big fish is normally just a thump, or you don't feel anything. You'll just all of a sudden just feel weight. It's just pressure all of a sudden. And that's how you know that you've been bit. There was one right there. Notice how I didn't swing on him though. I just reeled and pulled back. That was a small one. I felt a little tap right there. Just a quick little peck, peck, peck. But yeah, that's essentially how you fish the Neko rig. There's one. Little fella. Notice how I didn't set on him. All hard. And that technique that I was doing, shaking it, reeling it across the bottom. He's just a little dinker. Look at that one. He's so small, he's almost cute. Which, by the way, a lot of these finesse techniques like Neko rigging and drop shotting and fishing a shaky head and stuff like that, they have a reputation for getting a lot of bites but catching small fish. don't be discouraged by that, because they may have a reputation for catching small fish, but I've caught some tanks on all of those techniques. And when I say tanks, I don't mean 3-pounders. I'm talking, I've caught bass over 7 pounds on shaky heads and 5-pounders on drop shots, and I think my best is about a 6.5 on a Neko. So don't buy into the hype that little finesse worm is only going to catch you small fish. Honestly, you can upsize it and fish a super Neko rig. Upsize the size of your bites if you really wanted to. And that's a tip for you ledge fishermen.